second topic for the morning is understanding societal participation in a digital society. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our reliance on internet has brought positive and negative changes to our daily practice. This section of the symposium will highlight ways to understand societal motivation and participation by utilizing the findings and recommendations from selected research, which focus on television news, consumption, and child online exploitation. Exploitation. This is very, very important. Now, allow me to introduce our second moderator for this morning. Our moderator for track 2 has over 18 years of experience in top legal firms and also public listed companies, starting out as a corporate lawyer in Shen de la Moore and Co. She then practiced litigation in Zul and Rafiq and Partners. Then she joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, Astro for 11 years, then becoming the head of legal at Asia Digital. Presently the executive director of the Communications and Multimedia Content Forum, and outstanding track record. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator, Puan Mediha Mahmud. Kita berikan tepukan paling gemuruh. Give round of applause. Our second moderator for morning, Puan Mediha Mahmud. And allow me to invite on stage as well our panelists. Please welcome, give a big hand to Dr. Siti Khadijah Zainal Badri from University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Next up, a huge round of applause for Associate Professor Dr. Manik Kure from Multimedia University. And also, ladies and gentlemen, please help me to welcome a huge round of applause for Assistant Professor Dr. Lim Oi Hui from Harriet Ward University, Malaysia. Right? Track number 2, understanding societal participation in digital society. Puan Mediha Mahmud, the floor is now yours.
All right, thank you so much. First off, I'd just like to do this because it's very rare for me to be in a room full of doctors, professors, and academicians. I'm just very curious whether you guys consume social media the way the rest of us do. How many of you use Facebook? Show hands. Quite a few. Instagram? Still quite a number. X, formerly known as Twitter. Any TikTokers? Wow. So I'll be looking out for you on TikTok. So this section, track 2, we're going to be talking about societal participation in digital society. And I think it's a topic that resonates with all of us. I think all the topics because of the fact that all of us are participating in digital society. And I think what I can do for you is to go straight into this whole discussion. But before that, let me just give you an introduction of the panels who are with me today. We've got Dr. Siti, who is an Associate Professor of Applied Psychology from the Division of Organizational and Applied Psychology at the University of Nottingham. So without further ado, I would like to bring Dr. Siti to the floor, please. It's all yours.
Good morning to everyone. It was an honor to be here. I'm Siti from University of Nottingham. So today actually I'm representing Prof. Joanne, which is an esteemed professor in communications, media and cultural study, which unfortunately not able to be here due to some work commitment. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to present some of the key findings, what we have found from the recent DSRG project that we embarked last year in terms of the analysis of TV news consumptions among Malaysians in Peninsular Malaysia. So we know that due to the globalizations, digitalizations, and ongoing growth and evolutionary options and formats of TV news consumption in the country, and most importantly globally, it has led Malaysians to develop some different preferences actually and behavior for news consumptions, which actually extend beyond the unitary choices of TV news broadcasting. So although the actual situations of the audience preferences and public opinions remains unknown, we know a bit in terms of like how the Malaysians behave and how they watch TV news consumption and everything. But the latest nationwide research consumption data actually remains lacking, which actually what has been driving our research today. So along with Prof. Chowan, actually, what we try to do is we try to gauge some understanding and in that, explanation in terms of like the public opinions and data set concerning to TV news consumption and how they perceive TV and the futures of TV network in Malaysia. So in general, our investigations focuses on to what extent and how audience prefer, how they perceive, and actually the requirement in terms of whether there is a changing evolutions from the traditional broadcast news media to a newer one. Okay, right. So I'm not going to be talking much about the methodology because I know that this is something that sounds very technical, but in brief, what we done in terms of conducting this research, we adopt a mixed method methodology where we conduct both survey and interview. So the entire objective going into the survey, because we want to see or we want to extract some patterns, percentage, some statistic from the Malaysians audience in relation to TV news consumption and the perceptions on the future behavior and trends related to this subject. Right, and the second one, which is in-depth interview, this is a supplemental methodology that we adopt in a way that this serves as a way for us to go into more detail what have been provided in the survey and to take some more information from the respondent itself in terms of their opinion, personal opinion relations to this topic that we investigated. So technically, there is a couple of interesting findings that we have found in our study. Allow me to find. Okay. So first of all, in regards to the identifying elements about the current and future roles of broadcast news concerning Malaysia national interest, we found actually in general, majority of them with 73% still see TV news outlet as much reliable source than SNS. So this is one of the important elements that we investigated because we want to see whether there is a change of perception in terms of the traditionals and the modern worlds of delivering news in Malaysia. So, however, the 27% of our respondents see that SNS is actually being seen as alternative news outlet solutions. Not saying that they are actually disagree on the TV news, the traditionals, but we see here what we can conclude is there is, a new demands and evolving landscape in terms of news distribution method from Malaysian perspective. So several of our interviewees as well also expressed a high degree of trust to TV news in comparison to social media platform. As we know that in the first session we have talked, very extensively and briefly about how the digitalizations has invited fake news and so on. So this is also one of our concern that we find that in our research. So, some of our responses that we received from the study also mentions that other than going into TV network, they also go into alternative platform to catch some news. So, for example, our respondents here, I guess you can say that it's reliable, just that it's becoming less popular as the main source of info, meaning that they watch, but it's not their main source of information anymore. But to compare TV news and social media, I think it's about the same, meaning that they perceive that both of the network, both of the platforms are still reliable for them to get some news here in Malaysia. And then they also mentions, however, social media can sometimes be unreliable, especially when people can just simply post any fake news online. So this is where we found some kind of like perceptions or hints in terms of like how Malaysians view SNS as a potential source for fake news and all, and hence explains why the 73% of them still perceive TV news as a much stronger platform for consuming news in general. So the next one that we found that 52.9% responded indicating their opinion on watching TV news or broadcast to obtain news update. Unsurprisingly, 47. I think it's not surprising actually. 47.1% do not watch TV or broadcast news to get updates on their daily news. So there are a couple of reasons that they mentioned here, where I think everyone here in this room can actually relate to it, where they have like very few or lack of time in terms of like assessing the TV news. And then they also acknowledge in terms of the convenience of using the social media or in general mobile phones and social media to access news more than the TV itself. So some of our respondents, for example, highlighted that at this modern age, I think other platforms work better. Yeah. Unless we are in some apocalypse or internet is slowing down, then maybe TV would be a better alternative solution. And this is also hint, I guess, like maybe the rising influence of the younger generation, which the research, a lot of research say that younger generation seems to be very impatient. So this could be one of the explanations why they consume more social media, some of them, because when it's come to, like news that being delivered in social media, it's contained, like a bite-sized piece of information that is more digestible to them, okay? Yeah, and also there is, like some other respondent mentioned that I do see news from Facebook mostly, where the newspaper site just share short info and link to click for the full article. So you see there the mention of the short information. So other than going into the long info, they love to go with the short informations more because it's less time consuming to do that. Right. We also asked our respondents in terms of what they want to see actually in terms of present and future roles of TV news. Where here we talk, we give them some kind of like options, rank for them to rate. So technically, what's the Malaysians want to see is most of respondents rate the importance of providing news that inform them on recent social issue problems by 57.5%, and relevant national interests or agenda. So we see that these two kind of points are being ranked highly by our respondents. And then the interesting thing is, I mean, this representing the Malaysian landscape and how we see TV news. They're rated very poorly or lowly in terms of to discuss and bring forth a recent political agenda, and also those news to trigger imaginations and curiosity. And also some of our respondents also mentioning about, expanding the news platform, where one of our respondents mentioned it would be good if TV news can look into these and give useful advice or method to help people with depression. So here, this respondent is talking about like how TV news can actually integrate health-related behavior, coping behavior that can help them to combat mental health. I guess again, some of our respondents is actually a younger generation, so it is actually expected that we get this kind of teams emerging from our in-depth interview. So a very, when we go into details, what we have found in terms of the roles of Malaysian televisions and what the Malaysians want to see is, we see that some of the, like a keyword emerges, for example, news, mental, teen, health, and then also we see when we ask the question, we have additional thoughts on the role of broadcast news in relation to Malaysia. We found that there is mainly four key words that keeps on emerging, which is politics, educate, people, Malaysia. So when we try to expand on that, some of our respondents mentioned that they have no special preferences as long as the TV news should not be delivering a fake news issue or fake news or issue that not relevant or not important for them to acknowledge. And also they emphasize that they don't want a boring content. And one of the respondents, actually multiples of our respondents mentions as well, and they emphasize on the needs to the TV news to be non-biased content and less infotainment and provide more depth to the topic reported. So this showed some signal, some kind of need for TV news to respond and to enhance the qualities of news being delivered to the citizens, particularly Malaysians in general. So what Malaysia wants to see in the TV news, we also got some information. We asked them what they want to see exactly. So we asked them to rate, and we found that the first one that they rated is actually on current or breaking news. At that time, we give some information, give some examples. So like, for example, the war in Ukraine, this is what they want to see. That's followed by historical news, local news, business, economic news, foreign affairs news, entertainment, opinions, sports, and politics. So this rank actually shows a lot in terms of the demands and opinions that are being projected by the Malaysian community, where actually what they want to see, what they want to get update is more on the current things that happening around them, not so much on other aspect that happens or other kind of that might not be related to everyone. Right, so we also try to highlight some of the key findings here, where we, find in our study, because we have a lot of questions, but I'm not going to be, discussing all of the questions here. So this is some of the key findings that we found. So 1 of 5 participants, which is Malaysians that we recruited, mentioned that they don't want or they don't wish to see viral incident to be added in the TV news for some reason. And then in terms of the trends, we found that the total consumptions per day, for example, is for those who younger age of between 20 to 35, they consume news around 5 to 30 minutes only. And those with age 45 or above consume news 40 minutes and above, meaning that those the older generations tends to consume more news in comparison to the younger generations. And then more than half actually of Malaysian thinks that they have some influence on the news because of the rising use of social media site, WhatsApp, the ongoing rise of problem of fake news. They think that they have influence on the TV news as a consumer and prosumer in Malaysia. And then when we ask and we probe, some questions in terms of what kind of platform, alternative platform that they want to go in terms of consuming news, we found that most of them rated Facebook as the first one. That's going into the second one is online news portal, and then the third one, Instagram, followed by the rest. Right. So in conclusions, actually, when we asked them, actually 95% of Malaysians are quite ready for changing alternative news format, meaning that many of them are actually ready to embracing the new digitalizations that can be planned ahead. And then the key reasons of them using the alternative platform other than being busy and having other life commitments, so on and so forth, is actually because they think that this is things that they commonly use in daily life, and it's more user friendly because we are very, like digitalized right now. So it's more, like it's like on your hand and then you can access it everywhere. And then it is actually ease of use or it's more convenience. Right. So I guess in summary, a short implications and industry recommendation from our study actually involves four aspects. The first one is reliable ethics, format. The second one is format shadowing and content. So we want to, to give emphasis on the shadowing, where one of our findings that we found that most of our respondents, not really consume news on the prime time. So this gives some kind of like hints and directions for future news to be more broad in terms of like, feeding the consumer perspective or consumer demand. So rather than going into the prime time slot like 8 p.m. news, it's 10:30 news, then maybe we need to think of like more into more diversity in terms of like the TV news consumption. And also, it also open to some kind of like opportunity since not everyone consumes news in the TV platform. So I think the directions here is to move away and to adopt more modern, like digitalized TV news platform to deliver news to the audience and specifically to the Malaysians. I think, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Siti. I think we got a lot of information from there. I, for one, am quite curious as to why there seems to be a lack of appetite for political news. I can guess why. I think we've been inundated with political news thus far. I'm also curious as to why we are looking more towards Facebook and Instagram for news, and people get into that. Because I'm wondering whether is it the speed we get the news? Is it the bite size? Is it the visuals? We'll go to that later. I hope everybody has questions as well. But next, I would like everybody to welcome Dr. Manik Kure, who is an associate professor at the Faculty of Law, Multimedia University. Dr. Manik's main research interests are in cybercrimes, information technology law, and child law. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Manik.
Right. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I shall not waste time introducing myself. Very quickly, I'm from the Faculty of Law, and together with my co-researcher, Ms. Wan Diba, we would like to thank MCMC for giving us this opportunity to carry out with this research. And I'm also very pleased to share that the research findings from this grant has been published in a quartile journal, a Scopus journal, and we have not been able to update this because I just got the alert 2 days ago. So we are very grateful to MCMC for giving us this opportunity. Thank you very much. So the area that is at hand for this research is industry approaches in handling child online exploitation and abuse, policy guidelines and best practices. Now, coming from the Faculty of Law, you will see lots of reference to legislative provisions, terms, clauses, and we have left out cases mainly for easy understanding. So it is actually a very depressing topic, because if you look at it overall, we are looking into abuse of children, right? And I have been working on this for a very long time, and this research further sort of helps me to verify and confirm that one entity cannot address this issue alone. It has to be a collaborative effort, right? But however, for this particular research, we are looking into one aspect only, policy and guidelines, right? But before I get to that, to help you to understand, I'll quickly go through the background and some of the research that has been done, and then fit in my research findings. So child online exploitation is an ever-growing threat to the safety and well-being of children. From the time that we have concluded this particular research until now, there have been even more research going on and so many updates in Malaysia. There have been so many newspaper alerts, so many incidences, on this particular subject. So, of course, the slides you will see are up to March or late February, because that's the time that we actually concluded the research. So, since this particular research began, many countries have taken measures either to increase the penalties to address this problem. Now, I've just given 3 here: Online Safety Bill of UK, and Online Safety Miscellaneous Amendments Act 2023 of Singapore, and Online Safety Act 2021 of Australia. Now, Singapore, Australia, these are the latest, countries that they are having these legislative provisions. So the thing is that this is not something which is unique to Malaysia. Okay, you only have to do a very simple research to see where child online exploitation is, and it's everywhere. Now, when I started off this research, the term that I used to refer to was child pornography online. Okay, child pornography on the internet. But then, of course, there are changes in the terminology as well. So now we do not refer to it as child pornography, so it's child online exploitation of children. Okay, so Malaysia is not spared with this problem. And the alarming increasing of sexual exploitation against children is actually one of the indicators that we should do something about this. So, a very quick background. So, the thing is that we have legislative provisions in Malaysia, okay? And I will not read all these things. So, we have the Communications and the Multimedia Act 1998. We have online exploitation of children, okay? And we also have the content code. We have heard a lot about it. Now, we do have all these provisions, right? But the fact is that the issue is continuing. The problem is continuing, right? And the reason is that just because we have laws, regulations, does not mean to say that the problem will go away, because we are talking about the internet, right? I mean, I do not need to explain this to an audience of, of people who are working on technology and internet-related matters, how it works, okay? So there is, we thought that we need to do a specific research, bearing in mind that we have the laws, right? We have this situation going on. So how to regulate this problem, regulate this issue? It's not to eliminate it. We can never eliminate these issues, right? So by looking at the circumstances and looking at the framework we have, so we were looking into the guidelines, the best policies which is followed in Malaysia. And if at all that some of these policies are not working well, what we could do about it. So that is why this research came about, the industry approaches in handling child online exploitation. So the focus is on the industry, not so much about the law per se. So though we are coming from the faculty of law, we are not going to be looking into examining the law, though we had to in the report, but it's on the procedures followed, okay, by the industry. Now, so it is, of course, it's very imperative to look into this. So, in order for us to understand what are the best guidelines and the procedures, what we did was to study the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, which are followed by the industry, in line with, or bearing in mind, the SOPs are for regulating online, sexual material which relates to children, not about other SOPs, okay, not relating to advertising or any other thing, right? So it's mainly with a focus on children, preventing harm to children, and the SOPs. So this is why when we were looking into studying the SOPs, we looked at the content service providers. Okay, what would they do? What do they do? What kind of procedures do they follow? And what kind of SOPs do they follow? Okay, so this is what we examine. Now again, as we are coming from the Faculty of Law, it's mainly on documentation, right? So looking into examining the SOPs and all that. So basically, very quickly, the research objectives are to examine the current legislative framework including the CMA, the Communications and the Multimedia Act, and the content code on the standard processes and procedures implemented by the internet service providers, which extends to children. That's the first one. And the second one was to identify industry approaches in handling child online exploitation and abuse being implemented by newly implemented frameworks in Australia and Singapore. So we brought in Australia and Singapore because I'm summarizing this whole research because Australia and Singapore, when you look at the two jurisdictions, the main focus with these two new laws are that focus is on online service providers. Okay, so they are giving more concentration to providers, content service providers, basically guiding them and emphasizing what are the things that they should do. So that's why the two jurisdictions have been picked up, Australia and Singapore, and of course we didn't move to UK because it's still at the process of a bill, and you might have also heard, changes are going on there, okay? So the third one is to identify the gaps in the current framework in Malaysia, if at all, and then finally, of course, to put forward any recommendations that should be followed. So, aside from that, there were general questions: how best to regulate online material deemed dangerous or harmful to children, and what are the general regulatory measures? Okay, so these are to substantiate the three main objectives. Right? I will not go so far into this. Right? The methodology. Now, as I said, we had to examine, analyze, looking into legislative provisions, right? So there were two sets of procedures that we followed, the methodology. The first one is the content analysis. So we followed the doctrinal research methodology with a comparative element, that is comparative because we were looking into Australia and Singapore. And then we looked into, we did a qualitative data collection of secondary material. Of course, we had to comb through journals, newspapers, reports, law reports, all sorts of things to identify Australia and Singapore. And we also followed a non-probability sampling method. So we sent out a questionnaire to these identified telcos: TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, Telecom, Google Play Store, Twitter, Telecom Malaysia, Celcom, Maxis, App Store, all these people. We sent out a questionnaire and we asked them various questions such as how do they go about removing material if they find abusive material in their platforms. How do they term child online exploitative material? What would they look into it as? So we asked them various questions. Now, out of them, not many replied. We expected that because we are asking them for internal SOPs to be shared with us, right? So what we did was we combed through all the SOPs. And we were able to get all these SOPs with the assistance of MCMC officers also, from the internet also. So we were able to get all the SOPs. Now from the SOPs that these people, the content service providers follow, we were able to come up with these research findings. Number one, very quickly, the problem of child sexual exploitation is ever growing in Malaysia, and that is because the usage of the internet is increasing. And to top it all, the usage among children is also increasing, and that grew, soon after all this pandemic and, the MCO, all this. And then the overview of when you look at the statistics of the overview of the social media usage, it keeps increasing, and mainly it's WhatsApp, Telegram, right? So many of these apps are being used not just by adults alone, also by children. And that was also one of the reasons that in order to get access to these apps, right, you don't necessarily have a particular age. Some say 13, some say 18, and these are not quite implemented, right? So it's quite easy to get them. You don't really need parental consent, you don't need to register, right? Some of these apps. So it leads to children being able to access these. And why is it so important for us to focus on the apps? Because all this sexual material is also now distributed via these apps. It's not just that you go in front of the internet and you do a Google search and you find these. So kids are able to come across these abusive material. They are able to come across people who would harm them by grooming, right? And then it leads to so many other factors. So sexual exploitation of children is not just the children coming across these pictures. There are so many other factors. So internet users age 16 to 64 are mostly for social media platforms. And then when you look at these surveys, of course, heading the list is WhatsApp. So I won't go through all these because the data is available in the report. So laws in place, focus is more on the content. So when you look at the framework in Malaysia, we have the CMA, all these things. So the focus is more on the content, telling us what is obscene, what is indecent, what is child pornography, right? We have definitions, we have interpretations. So if you look at all the sections, most of it is on that. So the research finding is on, the second research finding is specifically on Australia. We studied the Australian method. Now when you look at the Australian method, it's very, very, can I say severe, very, very harsh. Because a lot of power, okay, is given to the commissioner, right? And the commissioner has the authority to direct a service provider to remove it within 24 hours, and if not, a huge penalty is given. Okay, so we have cases on that, and the cases are beginning to grow now because, of course, the statute was passed quite recently, right? And then in Australia, they have a classification method, and then I'll have to go very quickly with this. So, and then the outcome is this. So when you look at the online service providers, there are various kinds of providers. Link providers, right? Content host providers, so various different kinds of providers. So what Australia does is that they look at the kind of pictures, the kind of offences, and then against that, the penalty will be coming in, right? And the penalty is not very small amount of money to be paid, okay? So the next one is Singapore. Very quickly, Singapore, we could not find any cases because it was just recently implemented. Again, the key feature, time's up. May I have 1 minute, please? Okay, thank you very much. So the thing about Singapore is that, again, the emphasis is on online service providers. You see, Malaysia, our framework is on content. Though we have provisions dealing with internet service providers, but when you look at Australia and Singapore, it's more of the penalty, okay? And the mechanism of ensuring the penalty is gone through. So from the surveys we looked at, the SOPs, what we could come to the conclusion is this. Now, YouTube, Twitter, all those apps I went through, there is no consistent age limit for opening an account. Okay? So a 12-year-old kid can open an account, 13 can, 18 can, so there is no consistency in the age. No common interpretation on what amounts to online child exploitation. Almost all platforms do not prohibit users from creating, uploading or distributing content that facilitates the exploitation of abuse of children, but is subjected to immediate removal as per the community standards. No consistency in taking down these material. And finally, reporting of illegal material is to the parent company. So it depends on where it's coming from, right? Who they report to find out how to remove the material. So very quickly, the positive and the negative of the current framework, as in Malaysia. So of course we have positive, factors to look into. The CMA is there, the content code is there, we have the guidelines, we have how to address child exploitation online. However, the negative factors, what we think is that the guidelines are voluntary in nature. This is, Malaysia follows more self-regulation. So what we are recommending is that to adopt a classification system as in Australia and Singapore, and then to empower the commissioner with more power to remove, to direct the service providers to remove these online content, if at all it is found in their platforms, right? So this would be the last. It's not moving. I think I'm allowed to take more time. Okay, right. So anyway, that is the end of. Okay. Anyway, that is the last slide. The last one is thank you. So I'm able to say it to you all. So thank you very much, but I had to speed through due to time constraints, of course. But if I may take half a minute of your time, it is on child online exploitation. And we are not saying that we don't have any provisions here. Of course we do. And having provisions alone is not enough. It has to be a collective effort. And then what we are trying to say is, give more authority, make it more difficult to if at all this material is found, have penalties, put against these service providers to remove it, right? So I think if you want to read more of it, I think it would be available in the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes? Okay. All right, got it. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Manik. I'm sure all of us will be reading up because those are very excellent points made. I'll go straight into the next speaker. I'd like to welcome Dr. Lim Wui Wei, who is an assistant professor in Global College Heriot Watt University, Malaysia. Please welcome Dr.
A very good afternoon to everyone. Research Enterprise Department, distinguished moderator and panelists, ladies and gentlemen. My team and I, which consists of Dr. Wong, Mr. Yap, we are from the Heriot Watt University, Malaysia, and Dr. Wong from the Institute Pendidikan Guru Campus Ilmu Khas, would like to share our research finding regarding with the title of the implementation of technical and technological solutions among Internet service provider ISPs on child online protection. The COVID-19 pandemic has aggravated existing risks for children online. Children need special protection online and must be educated about how to steer clear of online risks. Hence, Malaysia Child Online Protection System needs to be strengthened in prevention and early intervention because there is an urgent need to build a more comprehensive understanding of the threats of online child sexual exploitations and abuse at national and regional levels. It is essential to examine the dilemmas of balancing the right, continue with the objectives by investigating the the practical, implementable, technological solutions from the internet service providers. All right, the methodology of this project, a qualitative approach was chosen in this study, and it is divided into 2 phases. The sampling will have been corrected from Selangor, alright, because it is the highest internet usage from the last 5 years, and included the area of urban and rural areas from Hulu Langat as well as Ampang area. In the first phase, the desk review of relevant documents and literature review of the articles regarding the legal and policy on child online protection has been reviewed. In the second phase, including the interview with the semi-instructional questions were conducted at the time preferred by the participants. They have been briefed, and consent forms were signed. The semi-structured interview, which covers the following aspects: infrastructure and agencies involved in preventing law enforcement and justice structures, current and emerging trends, existing laws and policies, national level research. And from this interview, we have gained in-depth knowledge of various stakeholders, which consists of the government sector, 2 representatives from the MCMC, and 4 representative participants from the PDRM Police Diraja Malaysia, 5 industrial players, as well as 6 educators and 6 parents. Finally, the outcome of these findings consists of the following aspects: the enumeration of rules and responsibilities and coordination of the industry players. Presentations and responses have been identified. The study also reviewed examples of key successes and challenges which were experienced by the stakeholders. Public awareness of the threat of the industry players and government have been identified and discussed. Effectiveness of existing of emerging policies and law related to industry players also have been discussed. The effectiveness of law enforcement mechanism for addressing industry players also have been explored. Let us share with you the following key findings based on the research objective of this study. Number 1, standard processes and procedures implemented by the local ISPs on child online protection. From the aspect of image analysis and image database, ISP would like to adapt the latest technology, for example, photo DNA, to automate matching processes. However, from the digital preferences, ISP facing difficulty to identify victims of online child abuse. For the keyword searching, for example, filtering, and mechanism for international cooperation with others, such as ISP also have implemented Interpol, right? And also, to continue with that, regulation in internet providers, such as the self-regulation, refers to the active responsibility of businesses to counter negative effects of their products and services by voluntarily developing rules and regulations and conduct regulated standards within the organization. For example, based on the regulations of CMA 1998 and the Content Code. And lastly, the parental control allows parents to restrict or block the search results. And also, each internet users can contribute by monitoring and alerting the authorities about the potential child online websites. And finally, in Malaysia, we consist of 2 types of the hotlines, for example, from the government as well as the civil society run One of them will be the Italian Cassia 5999. Secondly, the key findings based on the research objective number 2, industry approaches in handling child online exploitation and abuse being implemented by other governments, such as other countries and industry regulators. The following approach has been identified. Implementing, firstly, law enforcement authorities, for example, Laws of Malaysia Act 56, Evidence Act 1950, were certainly helpful in handling child online exploitation and abuse. For example, Philippines, from the other government, also implemented Anti-Child Pornography Act. It is found that digital technology can support investigation teams in detecting child sexual abuse materials, CSAM. This has been identified from the example from UK Internet Watch Foundation. The improvement on artificial intelligence would definitely help to tackle the problems and assisting law enforcement to stop the recirculation of CSAM. For example, the Google's Content Safety API. Blocking occurs when ISP block data while travel through their networks, can pick up and block domains and URLs in the open web. For example, in other countries, China also practicing filtering practice. Hashing, example, Microsoft Word using the photo DNA, the share system, involve detecting and responding to images of child sexual abuse. Next, web crawlers, or the automatic software that search engines and other bodies used. For example, from the Canadian Center for Child Protection. The aggregation, for example, Facebook, has been introduced is to address the regulatory and operational challenges by eliminating abusive and rampant or interactive technology act in US. For the third key findings, based on the third objective, identified the challenges and issues faced by industry in handling child online exploitations and abuse. Firstly, the increasing volume of CSAM, the child sexual abuse materials, from the police data, for example, 50,000 until towards the 5 million images, it is a major challenge to the ISPs. Next, the number of Malaysians IP addresses continue to be high, and ISP actually going through very high challenges as a frontliner, being the frontliner investigative work, and in collaboration with the PDRM. However, PDRM also facing the shortage in manpower. From the online activities, which is lack of online verification systems to assess the real age of participants. As example, from UNICEF, one-third of the internet service users, 800 million are children, and they are the online social media users. The defensive forensic measures is to evaluate, to improve the law enforcement, which is used by the child sex offenders, is a major challenge to detect child sexual abuse materials. The encryption, which is the secondary tool used, will potentially hide the CSN materials as well. And the dark web, which is the dark net, and consists of the secret websites, cannot be traced as well. And the emerging of the Internet of Things allows the billions of connected devices, increases the opportunity for the CSAM. And lastly, the cloud storage as the physical offline storage of CSAM materials, most common that as a storage medium used by the child sex offender, will be a great challenge. Finally, let us move on to the fourth key findings based on the research objective number 4. Well, the identification of the effective industry approaches in handling child online exploitation and abuse, which in line with the technology innovation as well as the current legal and regulatory framework that will be implemented. Firstly, the law enforcement. Malaysian society protection of users needs to be changed legally and culturally. And secondly, developing the digital technology by using software to automate it for the online CSAM materials is essential. Thirdly, the association and organization of the defending users and consumers, for example, ISP, the implementation by ISP of the host by hosting numerous web-based services to access web pages and services by looking at content liability, intellectual property rights, and crime detection as implemented. And the implementation measures to counter illegal goods services or content online to protect online users is required. And finally, the cooperation with the hosting services, with the hosting services provider is needed to ensure the transparency, accountability, as well as responsibility. And needs to be provided because specifically recommendations relating to the terrorist content, so the ISP need to provide certain sufficient resources to detect and identify terrorist content and submit reference. We would like to share some of the recommendations. Developing standard processes is essential to handle child sexual abuse materials. Secondly, educating children, parents, and educators about children's safety and their responsibility of information communication technology will create awareness and to be resilient to the online risks among our children. Integrating child rights by all the stakeholders, considerations into all corporate policies and management processes in order to protect our children online. As a conclusion, to protect our children online, all parties concerned play more proactive roles. Regulatory burden on the MCMC could be reduced, which would allow more internet stakeholders, which include parents, internet service providers, educators, and caregivers, to involve and play more effective roles towards reducing children exposure to the content risk and child online exploitation. And it is found parental support have been the most important element in protecting our children online. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think we have a few minutes for Q&A still. 16 minutes for Q&A. Okay, excellent. So before we open the floor to everybody else, I think I'll ask a question each to the speakers. Thank you so much for your presentation. Let's start with Dr. Siti, who spoke about news consumption and about how we are all consuming news a little bit differently these days. My question to you, Dr. Siti, is what's the impact of your research on the broadcasting of news? What do you think, or what do you hope for media players to take away from your research?
Well, thank you so much. I think that is actually a very important and very, good questions. So there's actually four implications and important in relation to the importance and impact of this research, which we in general provided in, divided into four different aspects. So the first one is in terms of reliability and the ethics of the production. We see that Malaysians in general are demanding more ethical publications and reliability in TV news, not only behavior, but also TV news content. So this should be some essential and pertinent and could be, area where, relevant stakeholders should look into in consolidating their practices to meet the community perception. The second one is in terms of formatting, which I believe that I have touched a bit during the presentation just now. So it gives some kind of insight in terms of behavior changes in terms of how Malaysians actually consume news. Therefore, in terms of the practical importance of this information is it signals us to actually to start it's more in terms of advancing and expanding the timelines or the alternative and options that are available for Malaysians to access and to consume news in general. It's also one of the things that we want to emphasize here is majorities of our respondents also prefer to receive or consume news information about social issues and problems in regards to in comparison to other aspects of news that we ask them to rate it. So this could be some kind of some point of considerations for future TV news and broadcast, and also relevant stakeholders to consider, especially when they want to publish or to format or to create a content for TV news consumption. Now, from shadowing point of view, the interesting bits about this, when we ask our respondents in terms of how they consume news, they say that yes, TV news is still important, but there is also some, very strong evidence that the rising importance of social media use among the Malaysian community. So henceforth, what we can draw here is actually in terms of, in terms of the need for the regulators to actually converge the traditional and the modern TV news outlet platforms so that we can increase the Malaysians' uptake in terms of watching news in general. So what happened here is if, let's say, failure to respond to this kind of trends or failure to respond to this kind of changes can lead to lower consumptions of news and can lead to the citizen really not being updated, adequately in the future. And also, content-wise as well, we also found, and then we actually realized from our findings that a lot of news consumers are actually active in comparison to passive. So they enjoy taking participations in the, consuming news and delivering the news and sharing the news. So this is one of the aspects that we find that very interesting. So at the same time, we found that they are also actively seeking for credible news, and up-to-date information online that can actually and help them to empower themselves. So one of the key here, especially when it comes to the patterns of the responses that we get, is a lot of them talking about how you should be empowered and enrich themselves, but not only also, it's not from their perceptions, TV news should not only talking about other person, but it should also be able to enrich and empower themselves. So this is something that we find very, very interesting. And also one of the aspects that keep on emerging is, from our interview, is actually on the health aspect. So when we go into that interview, a lot of our participants mentioned about their mental health and how this related to TV news consumptions and all. While this might not be a direct relationship because we don't do, particularly a specific research that direct the linkages, but it could attain some kind of connection that TV news consumption can actually bridge the platform for them to acquire much healthier behavior or actually access information on how they, should be behaving in certain way in terms of their health. That's
Thank you very much, Dr. Siti. I do look forward to see whether media players make any changes to how to do this. For Dr. Mani, based on your presentation earlier, I think we recognize that there is a very big problem with child online exploitation. And my question for you here is, how do industry policies and guidelines on handling child online exploitation and abuse align with existing national and international laws related to child protection and online safety?
Right, thank you. I think, okay, I'll address the question in two different ways. So I will look at the national policies. So as I said, at the very beginning when we started off this research, at the previous stages, initially we said there is an inadequacy in the law in Malaysia, that we do not have sufficient laws and regulations to address the problem. But over the years, we have specific laws enacted now. We do have an understanding and an interpretation and definitions of what amounts to child pornography. Those are the words that are used in our statutes. We do understand what amounts to online grooming of children. We do understand, of course, obscene is still the old law that we are using. So indecency, all these things, we do have interpretations. And these are found in the content code. And aside from that, we have various sections, like section 211, 233, so various sections are there. So the law is in place, right? But the thing is, we also need procedural mechanisms. So that is how, if you have various policies and guidelines in existence, it would be complementing the national or the existing framework that we have. Because I personally think that one should not enact laws as and every time you have an issue. Because there is a famous saying, law is always one step behind IT, right? So by the time we come up with the law, then things have developed, right? So I think the first thing is just to see how we could best make use of the current law and, amend it, right? And then bring it in on par. So how would it, tally with the national law, or how would it respond to it? Of course, to complement each other. Now, at an international level, we have conventions and we have treaties. For example, the Convention on the Cyber Crimes, right? So we have lots of treaties and and conventions rather, that tells us this is how child online exploitation should be examined, should be considered, and these are some of the, the interpretations, right? So if you are a member to these conventions, and that means to say we are bound to follow it, right? So how does this research complement to that? That is by harmonizing. There is some sort of a uniformity in what we have in Malaysia as against these international conventions. Because you see, child online exploitation is not an issue that is pertaining to one country alone, right? So as Dr. Lim said earlier, we have now AI, right? So it can go both ways. AI can help to reduce it, right? But at the same time, it can generate more abusive pictures of children. So much so to the extent we wouldn't know whether they are real children or otherwise. So that is where this whole child online exploitation is heading now, okay? We might come to a stage, we have it, we do not know. So again, to get back to your question, so in a national level, again, to bring it online, right on par, and then for international level, I think it is mostly for harmonization of laws.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mani. I think one thing that I'm getting very clearly from you is that in order to address this problem, there needs to be a very concerted and collaborative effort for everyone. And I think that also overlaps to what Dr. Lim was saying earlier about how integrating child rights needs to be considered in corporate policies, for example. So my question to you, Dr. Lim, is, from the research that you've done here, what types of data can be obtained from this study that will be able to support MCMC's decision to handle child online exploitation and abuse and in coming up with their policies?
All right, thank you for your question. I think from our research findings, the data that we obtain, because firstly we are doing the literature review, content analysis, and by looking at the different implementation and policy regulations in comparison with Southeast Asia as well as the foreign countries, Western countries, and at the same time, we are actually looking into the insightful opinions which we conducted the in-depth interview through the internet service providers. And and here I would like to thank and acknowledge. We thank you so much for the support given by the research enterprise department that giving us the contact to actually talk to the internet service provider. What's in their views that are they facing any challenges, and what are the views that they actually can help the government to actually to protect our children online. And one of the ISPs actually mentioned that we'll be surprised that when the parent actually buying the package or the phone, register the children for the phone, right? And actually they do introduce to the parent that some free online online child protection, or even with a very minimum charges, that to introduce the packages to the parent to buy, but they actually facing challenges that to encourage the parent to support this because due to the lack of digital maybe literacy, they do not know the importance of the child online safety. So therefore, I believe that from all this information that we have investigated from this research output, everything will be started from not only the ISP, the service provider, should be down to the public, especially the care providers, the educators, because we do interview the educators. What is the awareness about to create the importance to actually aware the youth or the children when they use the internet. So, and we even interview, besides the educators, we also interview the parents. So we also listen from the perspective of parents that why do they actually facing challenges when they actually try to implement the filtering this on the children when the child actually using the internet services. So I believe that all this will assist MCMC in combating the child online abuse, especially also assisting our PDRR, because we also interview Police Diraja Malaysia. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lin. I know everybody's looking at their clocks, waiting for lunch, but the floor is open for questions. So if you have any questions, yes, please, the gentleman at the back.
Silakan. Your name, where you're from, and your question, please.
Thank you, Fauzan from International Islamic University. My question to Dr. Siti Khadijah about the news. What is your suggestion or opinion to MCMC or the government to handle fake news? Because MIT studies, Twitter studies, find out fake news travel 6 times faster than true news. And in Malaysia, maybe it's 10 times faster, especially during the election times. And we are those in academia, tired of this fake news, people being manipulated and viewed in a way about this true news. But how are we going to handle it? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think that is a very good question, and I wish Prof. Joanne is here. So I think I'm gonna answer that based on like consumer perspective, because I think that is like a very big issue to address if we really think of it. And then in relation to fake news, there is like a very huge scope, that we need to discuss, because fake news can happen everywhere, anywhere, across social media platform. And I know that my mom engaged in some kind of a behavior as well, like when they receive, like fake news, and they started, like distribute the fake news to another person, that is becoming, like a change reaction to one person to another, which is very interesting. So I guess in the perspective of MCMC, what they can do is actually by controlling in terms of like how the consumer thing in terms of this fake news. Mainly it's actually about creating awareness. Not so much, I mean, if you want to tackle in terms of the technical ways on handling things, yes, we can, but it can be very expensive and it can take very, very long time because of the nature of the issue itself. So the key here is actually spreading the awareness to the citizens in terms of the implication of fake news and what is considered as fake news, and how we actually perceive healthy behavior in consuming news itself. So that can help a lot in terms of giving our citizens, like information to handling and to differentiate what is true and what is not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tissit. Thank you for that question. I think we only have time for one. We're out of time. Thank you once again to the panelists. I'm sure they'll be very happy to see you after this to answer any questions you have. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. We have time for Mediha Mahmood. Thank you very much, ladies. Can we have a quick photo op together with the amazing ladies on stage? Once again, thank you, Mediha. Thank you, Dr. Siti Khatijah, Associate Professor Dr. Madi Kure, and also Assistant Professor Dr. Lin Uwe for that very insightful and important topic. Very personal topic for me, especially the control on child exploitation. As I myself have a young son, 10-year-old. So a very interesting topic as well. Thank you very, very much, ladies. Once again, can we give a big hand to the amazing ladies on stage? Alright, with that, thank you very, very much. There we have it, track number 2, talking about understanding society participation in digital society.